You don't deserve it. My mother changed the will while I was in surgery. Then the lawyer spoke. The anesthesia was wearing off in waves. One moment I was drowning in black nothing. The next I could hear voices bleeding through the fog, like radio static finding a signal. My body felt like it belonged to someone else, heavy and distant, but my ears worked just fine. That's when I heard my mother's voice. Just do it now, Richard, while she's still under. We don't know if she'll wake up. The words didn't make sense at first. My brain was still swimming in whatever chemicals they'd pumped into me to keep me quiet during the surgery. But then I heard the second voice. Male. Tired. Uncomfortable. Mrs. Brennan, this is highly irregular. She should be conscious when... I have power of attorney. My mother's voice cut through his objection like a blade through butter. Cold. Final. The paperwork is right here. She signed it before the surgery. You said you needed updated beneficiary information for the estate distribution, so let's update it. I tried to move, tried to open my eyes, tried to scream, but my body was a prison. The paralytic they'd given me during the operation hadn't worn off yet. I was a passenger in my own skull, listening to my life being dismantled while I couldn't even twitch a finger. The sound of papers shuffling, then a pen scratching. This transfers the entirety of the Brennan Estate Trust to you as primary beneficiary, the man said. His voice sounded strained. And it removes Cassandra entirely from... She doesn't need it. My mother's voice was so casual, like she was ordering coffee. She's never been responsible, never made anything of herself. I'm the one who held this family together after my father died. The money should have been mine from the start. More scratching. The pen moving across paper, rewriting my future in real time while I floated in chemical darkness, screaming inside a body that wouldn't obey. Sign here, the man said. And here. I heard my mother's signature, confident, unhurried, like she'd been waiting for this moment for years. If she doesn't make it through recovery, my mother said, her voice dropping to something softer, almost gentle. At least the estate won't be stuck in probate. You know how messy these things get. If she doesn't make it, the words landed in my chest like a stone dropping into a well. She wasn't just expecting me to die. She was planning for it. She had walked into this hospital with a lawyer and paperwork, ready to harvest my inheritance the second my heart stopped beating. The pen stopped. Papers were folded. Footsteps moved toward the door. Mrs. Brennan, the man said quietly, I hope you understand that if she recovers and challenges this, she won't. My mother's voice was ice. Cassandra has always been weak. Even if she wakes up, she won't fight. She never does. The door closed. The room went silent, except for the rhythmic beeping of the heart monitor next to my bed. My heart, still beating, still fighting, still refusing to give her what she wanted. I focused everything I had on my right hand, on moving even one finger. The anesthesia was fading, but it felt like trying to swim through concrete. My finger twitched, just once. A tiny movement. But it was mine. I wasn't dead yet. And if I woke up, she was going to regret underestimating me. Before I tell you what happened when I finally opened my eyes and realized the full scale of what my mother had done, drop a comment and let me know where you're reading from and what time it is right now. I want to see how far this story reaches, because what happened next changed everything. I woke up 6 hours later. The fluorescent lights in the recovery room were too bright, stabbing into my skull like needles. My throat felt like I'd swallowed broken glass. There was an IV in my arm, a blood pressure cuff squeezing my bicep every few minutes, and a dull, deep ache in my abdomen where they'd cut me open. More ovarian cyst removal, routine surgery, in and out in 3 hours. That's what the doctor had told me 2 weeks ago when we scheduled it. Low risk, standard procedure. I'd be back on my feet in a few days. I hadn't expected to wake up as an orphan with empty pockets. The nurse noticed me stirring and walked over, her smile warm and practiced. Hey there, Cassandra. Welcome back. How are you feeling? Tired, I croaked. My voice sounded like gravel. Thirsty. She handed me a small cup of ice chips. Take it slow. The anesthesia can make you nauseous. I sucked on the ice, letting it melt on my tongue, and tried to organize my thoughts. The conversation I'd heard felt like a dream. Hazy, distorted. Maybe I'd imagined it. Maybe the drugs had made me paranoid. But then the nurse said something that made my blood freeze. Your family handled all your paperwork while you were out. Such a relief, right? One less thing to worry about. I stared at her. Paperwork? Yay, your mom said she had power of attorney. She took care of the billing and some estate stuff with a lawyer. Real efficient. Most families wait until after discharge to deal with that mess. My stomach dropped. It wasn't a dream. It was real. My mother had actually done it. She'd brought a lawyer into my hospital room while I was unconscious and changed my grandfather's will to cut me out completely. She'd bet on me dying, and when that didn't happen fast enough, she'd just moved forward anyway. Where is she now? I asked, keeping my voice steady. My mom. The nurse checked her tablet. She left about 2 hours ago. Said she'd be back tomorrow to pick you up. 2 hours? She'd signed away my future, and then left to get lunch or run errands, or whatever the hell a person does after committing fraud. I closed my eyes and took a slow breath. Panic wouldn't help. I was a data analyst. I solved problems by breaking them into smaller pieces and processing them one step at a time. This was just another problem. A horrible, soul-crushing problem, but still solvable. First, I needed to know exactly what she'd done. Second, I needed to figure out if it was legal. Third, I needed to decide if I was going to fight or fold. Can I see my phone? I asked the nurse. She hesitated. You're supposed to rest. Please. She sighed and pulled my phone from the drawer next to the bed. 5 minutes. Then you need to sleep. I unlocked the screen and scrolled through my messages. 17 texts from my mother. All sent in the last 8 hours. Cassie, the surgery went well. You're in recovery. The doctor said everything looked good. I handled some paperwork for you so you don't have to worry about it. Rest up. I'll see you tomorrow. Every message was cheerful, supportive, loving. Like she hadn't just robbed me blind while I was on an operating table. There was also a text from my husband, Marcus. Your mom said you're okay. I wanted to be there, but she said only one visitor allowed. Call me when you wake up. I stared at that message for a long time. Marcus had wanted to be here. My mother had blocked him. Why? I dialed his number. He picked up on the first ring. Cassie, thank God. Are you okay? I'm fine, I said, my voice barely above a whisper. Marcus, did my mom talk to you today? There was a pause. Too long. Yeah. She called me this morning. Said the surgery was routine and you'd be home tomorrow. Did she say anything else? Another pause. She said she was handling some financial stuff for you. Something about your grandfather's estate. She said it was better this way. My grip tightened on the phone. Better this way. What does that mean? I don't know, Cassie. I didn't ask. I figured it was family business. His voice sounded strained, guilty. She said not to worry you with details while you were recovering. Marcus. I kept my voice calm, even though I wanted to scream. What did she say exactly? He exhaled slowly. She said your grandfather's will was being finalized, and that she was making sure everything was handled properly, so you wouldn't have to deal with legal stress. She said you'd thank her later. I'd thank her later. For stealing my inheritance, for rewriting a will without my knowledge, for betting on my death. I have to go, I said. Cassie, wait. I hung up. Marcus wasn't lying to me, but he wasn't telling me everything either. My mother had said something to him that made him uncomfortable enough to avoid the topic entirely. She'd pressured him, maybe even threatened him. And he'd folded because that's what people did around my mother. They folded. Everyone except me. I opened my text messages again and scrolled further back. 3 days before my surgery, there was a message from my mother I'd ignored at the time. Cassie, I need you to sign a medical power of attorney before your surgery. Just in case something happens. Standard procedure. I'd signed it. I'd signed it because she was my mother, and I trusted her, and I didn't think a routine surgery required a lawyer and a conspiracy. I was an idiot. The nurse came back and gently took my phone. "That's enough screen time. You need to rest." I let her take it. I didn't need it anymore. I already knew what had happened. My mother had used the power of attorney I'd given her to authorize changes to my grandfather's estate while I was legally incapacitated. She'd brought in a lawyer, forged my consent, and transferred everything to herself. The only question now was whether I was going to let her get away with it. I closed my eyes and thought about my grandfather. Gerald Brennan had been a kind man, quiet, thoughtful. He'd made his money in real estate, buying up commercial properties in the 80s and selling them at the perfect time before the market crashed. By the time he died 2 years ago, he'd accumulated an estate worth just over $2 million. He'd left it all to me. Not my mother, not my younger brother Kyle. Just me. I was his favorite. Everyone knew it. I was the one who visited him every Sunday when he got sick. I was the one who sat with him during chemo. I was the one who held his hand when he died. My mother had been too busy. Kyle had been too young. It was just me and Grandpa Gerald at the end. He'd told me once during one of our last conversations that he was leaving me everything because he trusted me to do something good with it. He said my mother would waste it trying to prove something to people who didn't care. He said Kyle wasn't ready for that kind of responsibility. "You're the steady one, Cassie," he'd said, his voice thin and raspy from the cancer. "You're the one who'll make it count." I'd promised him I would, and now my mother was trying to take it. I opened my eyes and stared at the ceiling. She'd called me weak. She'd said I never fought back. She was wrong. I wasn't weak. I was just careful. I didn't start fights I couldn't win. But this was a fight worth having. I was going to burn her entire plan to the ground. They discharged me the next afternoon. My mother arrived at exactly 2 p.m., wearing a soft pink cardigan and a sympathetic smile. She looked like everyone's dream mom, warm, caring, concerned. She hugged me gently, careful not to press against my stitches. "How are you feeling, sweetheart?" "Sore," I said. "But okay." "Good, let's get you home." She helped me into the car, buckled my seatbelt like I was a child, and drove me back to the apartment I shared with Marcus. The whole ride, she talked about meal prep and rest schedules and how I should take at least a week off work. She didn't mention the will. She didn't mention the lawyer. She didn't mention the paperwork. She was acting like nothing had happened, like she hadn't committed fraud while I was unconscious, like she was just a devoted mother taking care of her daughter. When we got to my apartment, Marcus was waiting at the door. He looked nervous. His hands were shoved deep in his pockets, and he couldn't quite meet my eyes. "Hey, babe," he said. "How are you feeling?" "Tired," I said. My mother helped me inside and settled me on the couch with pillows and blankets. She made tea. She fluffed cushions. She acted like the world's most attentive caregiver. And the whole time, I watched her. I watched the way she moved through my apartment like she owned it. I watched the way she dismissed Marcus with small gestures, waving him away when he tried to help. I watched the way she smiled at me, her eyes cold and calculating behind the warmth. She was testing me, waiting to see if I'd bring it up, waiting to see if I even remembered. I didn't give her the satisfaction. "Thanks for everything, Mom," I said, my voice soft and grateful. "I don't know what I'd do without you." Her smile widened. "That's what mothers are for, sweetheart." She stayed for another hour, fussing over me, before finally leaving. The second the door closed behind her, Marcus sat down next to me. "Cassie, how we need to talk." "I know." He ran his hands through his hair, a nervous habit he'd had since college. "Your mom called me 6 times yesterday. She kept saying the same thing, that you weren't strong enough to handle your grandfather's estate, that the stress would destroy you, that she was doing you a favor by taking it off your plate." "What did you say?" "I told her it wasn't her decision." He looked at me finally, his eyes pleading. "But she said you'd already agreed to it. She said you signed the papers before surgery." "I didn't." "I know." His voice cracked. I know you didn't, but she was so convincing, and I didn't want to believe she'd lie about something like that. I reached over and took his hand. She threatened you, didn't she? He nodded. She said if I tried to interfere, she'd make sure you never spoke to me again. She said she'd tell you I was trying to steal your inheritance for myself. She said she'd destroy our marriage. There it was. The leverage. My mother had spent years building a narrative where she was the hero and everyone else was a threat, and she'd weaponized that narrative against my husband to keep him quiet. I'm sorry, Marcus whispered. I should have called you. I should have told you. You're telling me now, I said. That's what matters. I spent the next 3 days pretending to recover. I stayed on the couch. I let Marcus bring me soup. I answered my mother's texts with gratitude and emojis. I played the role of the compliant daughter who didn't ask questions. But behind the scenes, I was building a case. I started with the hospital, where I called the patient advocate and requested copies of every document signed during my admission. They sent me a file within 48 hours. Inside was the power of attorney I'd signed before surgery, along with a medical consent form and a billing authorization. There was no will, no estate paperwork, nothing that gave my mother legal authority to change my grandfather's trust. Next, I called my grandfather's lawyer. His name was Howard Mendel, and he'd handled the Brennan estate for over 30 years. He was semi-retired now, but he still managed the trust distributions. Cassandra, he said warmly when I called. How are you feeling? Your mother mentioned you'd had surgery. I'm fine, Mr. Mendel. I'm calling because I need to ask you about the estate. There was a pause. What about it? Did you process any changes recently? Another pause. Longer this time. I'm not sure what you mean. My mother told me she updated the beneficiary information. I said carefully. She said it was handled while I was in surgery. The silence on the other end of the line stretched so long I thought he'd hung up. Then he said, very quietly, Cassandra, I didn't process any changes. My heart stopped. What? I haven't touched your grandfather's estate since the initial distribution 2 years ago, he said. The terms of the trust are ironclad. Everything goes to you when you turn 35, or in the event of a qualifying life event like marriage or the birth of a child. Your mother has no claim to it. I felt the room tilt. Mr. Mendel, my mother told me she brought a lawyer to the hospital and changed the will. She brought a lawyer, he said slowly, but it wasn't me. And whoever she brought doesn't have the authority to alter your grandfather's trust. That document was sealed and notarized. Any changes would require your explicit written consent, witnessed by me personally. So it's fake. If she signed something, yes, it's fake. I sat down hard on the couch, my mind racing. Why would she do this? Mr. Mendel sighed. Cassandra, I'm going to be honest with you. Your mother has contacted me 4 times in the last 6 months, asking if there was any way to challenge the terms of the trust. She claimed you were financially irresponsible. She said your grandfather was mentally unfit when he wrote the will. She even suggested you'd manipulated him. That's insane. I know. I told her the trust was bulletproof, but she didn't stop. 3 weeks ago, she asked if a medical emergency could trigger an estate review. 3 weeks ago, right before my surgery. She'd been planning this. Mr. Mendel, I said slowly, I need your help. Anything. I need you to come to a meeting. I need you to be there when I confront her. I need her to admit what she did in front of a witness. He was quiet for a long moment. Then he said, I'll be there. Just tell me when. I set the trap for the following Monday. I texted my mother and told her I wanted to talk about the estate. I said I was confused about the paperwork and needed her to explain it to me. I made myself sound weak, uncertain, scared. She responded within minutes. Of course, sweetheart. Let's meet at Howard Mendel's office. He can walk us through everything. I'll set it up. She thought she was controlling the narrative. She thought she'd walk into that office, present her fake paperwork, and steamroll me into submission. She had no idea I'd already spoken to Howard. The meeting was scheduled for 10 a.m. I arrived 15 minutes early, my stomach churning with nerves. Howard met me in the lobby and led me to a private conference room. "Are you sure about this?" he asked. "I'm sure." He nodded and handed me a folder. "This is a copy of the original trust document. I've also included a statement from the hospital confirming that no estate-related paperwork was processed during your surgery. If she tries to produce a fraudulent document, we have everything we need to challenge it." I took the folder, my hands shaking. "Thank you." "Cassandra," he said gently, "I want you to know that what she's doing isn't just unethical. It's illegal. If she forged your consent or fabricated documents, that's fraud. You have every right to press charges." I nodded. "I know." At exactly 10 a.m., my mother walked in. She looked radiant, confident. She was wearing a navy blue suit that probably cost more than my rent, and her hair was styled in perfect waves. She smiled when she saw me. "Cassie, darling, how are you feeling?" "Better," I said quietly. She sat down across from me, setting her purse on the table. "I'm so glad you wanted to talk about this. I know estate stuff can be overwhelming, but I promise it's all taken care of." Howard cleared his throat. "Mrs. Brennan, before we begin, I need to clarify something. Cassandra contacted me last week with some concerns about recent changes to her grandfather's trust." My mother's smile didn't falter. "Yes. I updated the beneficiary information while she was in surgery. I have power of attorney, so it was all perfectly legal." "I see." Howard opened his folder. "And do you have documentation of these changes?" "Of course." She reached into her purse and pulled out a small stack of papers. She slid them across the table with the confidence of someone who thought they'd already won. Howard picked up the papers and scanned them. His expression didn't change, but I saw his jaw tighten. "Mrs. Brennan," he said slowly, "these documents are not affiliated with the Brennan Estate Trust." Her smile flickered. "What?" "These appear to be generic will templates downloaded from the internet and filled out by hand. They have no legal standing." The room went very quiet. My mother stared at him. "That's impossible." "I had a lawyer." "What lawyer?" Howard asked. She blinked. Richard Calloway. He's a family attorney. He came to the hospital and processed everything." Howard folded his hands on the table. "Mrs. Brennan, I am the sole trustee of the Brennan estate. Any changes to the trust would have to be processed through me, and I have no record of a Richard Calloway or anyone else submitting modification requests." Her face went pale. "You're lying." "I'm not." Howard slid another document across the table. "This is a letter from the hospital confirming that no estate-related paperwork was signed during Cassandra's surgery. The only documents processed were standard medical consent forms." My mother looked at the letter, then at me, then back at Howard. Her composure was cracking. "This is absurd. I was protecting her. She's not capable of managing that kind of money." "That's not your decision to make," Howard said firmly. "She's my daughter. And the trust is hers." Howard's voice was calm but unyielding. "Your father made his wishes very clear. The estate goes to Cassandra, not you." My mother stood up abruptly, her chair scraping against the floor. "My father was senile when he wrote that will. He didn't know what he was doing." "He was evaluated by 2 independent physicians," Howard said. "Both confirmed he was of sound mind. Then Cassie manipulated him." Her voice was rising now, shrill and desperate. "She spent all that time with him at the end, whispering in his ear, turning him against me." "Mom," I said quietly. She whirled on me. "Don't you mom me. You stole my inheritance. That money should have been mine. I'm the one who took care of him for years. I'm the one who sacrificed everything." "You visited him twice," I said, my voice steady. "In the last year of his life, you visited him twice. I was there every single week. Because you had nothing else to do, she screamed. You've never accomplished anything, Cassandra. You're a data analyst living in a crappy apartment with a mediocre husband. I built a life. I raised a family. I deserved that money. The words hung in the air like poison. Howard stood up. Mrs. Brennan, I think we're done here. No. She slammed her hands on the table. We're not done. I'm filing a challenge. I'll take this to court. I'll prove she manipulated him. If you do that, Howard said calmly, I will be forced to report this meeting to the Bar Association and the police. She froze. You brought fraudulent documents to a legal meeting, Howard continued. You admitted to attempting to alter a trust without authorization, and based on Cassandra's testimony, you obtained power of attorney under false pretenses. That's fraud, Mrs. Brennan, and it's a felony. Her face went white. You wouldn't. I'm an officer of the court, Howard said. I'm obligated to report illegal activity. She looked at me, her eyes wild. Cassie, please, I'm your mother. You can't do this to me. I met her gaze and felt nothing. No anger, no sadness. Just a cold, clear certainty. You tried to steal my inheritance while I was unconscious, I said. You told people I didn't deserve it. You called me weak. You bet on me dying, and when I didn't, you just moved forward with the plan anyway. I was trying to help you. No. You weren't. My voice was quiet but firm. You were trying to help yourself, and now you're going to face the consequences. I stood up and looked at Howard. File the report. He nodded. My mother's face twisted into something ugly. You ungrateful little bitch. After everything I've done for you. Everything you've done to me, I corrected. There's a difference. She lunged toward me, but Howard stepped between us. Mrs. Brennan, I'm going to have to ask you to leave. She stood there for a moment, trembling with rage, before grabbing her purse and storming out. The door slammed behind her, hard enough to rattle the walls. I sat down, my legs suddenly weak. Howard sat down next to me. Are you okay? I will be. He handed me a bottle of water. I'm going to file a formal complaint with the state bar and contact the police. I'm based on what just happened. They'll likely open an investigation. What happens to her? Depends on the evidence. But fraud charges are serious, especially when they involve estates and vulnerable adults. He paused. Cassandra, you were technically incapacitated during surgery. If she signed documents on your behalf without proper authorization, that's abuse of a vulnerable adult. That's a felony. I took a sip of water, trying to process everything. She's going to hate me forever, I said. She already did, Howard said gently. You just didn't see it until now. The fallout was brutal. Within 48 hours, the police opened an investigation. They interviewed the hospital staff, reviewed security footage, and subpoenaed my mother's phone records. They found text messages between her and Richard Calloway, the lawyer she'd hired. Turned out he wasn't a lawyer at all. He was a paralegal who'd been disbarred 3 years earlier for forging documents. They'd met at a networking event. My mother had paid him $5,000 cash to come to the hospital and witness her fake will changes. He'd taken the money and disappeared. The police arrested him first. He gave up my mother immediately, turning over emails and text messages where she explicitly outlined her plan to forge my consent while I was in surgery. They arrested her on a Thursday morning. I wasn't there. I didn't want to see it. But Marcus told me later that she'd screamed the entire time, insisting she was the victim, that I'd manipulated everyone, that she was just trying to protect the family. The charges were extensive: fraud, forgery, abuse of a vulnerable adult, conspiracy. And because she'd used a fake lawyer, they added on charges related to impersonating legal authority. My brother, Kyle, called me that night. Cassie, what the hell did you do? I told the truth, I said. You got Mom arrested. Mom got herself arrested. She was just trying to help. Kyle, she tried to steal my inheritance while I was on an operating table. She forged documents. She hired a fake lawyer. She committed multiple felonies. She's our mother. And I'm her daughter, I shot back. That didn't stop her from calling me weak and undeserving. That didn't stop her from betting on my death. He was quiet for a long moment. Then he said, "I didn't know it was that bad." "Now you do." He hung up. The trial took 6 months. My mother pled not guilty and fought every charge. She hired an expensive defense attorney who tried to paint me as a vindictive daughter seeking revenge. They claimed I'd manipulated my grandfather. They claimed I'd fabricated evidence. They claimed I was mentally unstable. None of it worked. The evidence was overwhelming. The fake documents, the text messages, the testimony from hospital staff, the confession from Richard Calloway, and my own testimony, delivered calmly and clearly about waking up during surgery and hearing my mother plan my financial execution. The jury deliberated for 3 hours. Guilty on all counts. The judge sentenced her to 4 years in prison and ordered her to pay restitution for the legal fees and emotional damages. She screamed at me from the defendant's table, called me a liar, called me a thief, called me a monster. I didn't react. I just stood up and walked out of the courtroom. Marcus was waiting for me in the hallway. He pulled me into a hug, and I let myself cry for the first time in 6 months. "It's over," he whispered. "Yeah," I said, "it's over." That was 2 years ago. I'm 36 now. The estate finally cleared probate, and I received the full inheritance. I used part of it to pay off our apartment and invest in a small business. The rest is in a trust for our future kids. My mother writes me letters from prison. Long, rambling letters about how I destroyed the family, how I'm selfish, how I'll regret this. I don't read them. I just file them away in a folder labeled evidence in case she tries something when she gets out. Kyle doesn't talk to me anymore. He thinks I'm cruel. He thinks I should have forgiven her. But forgiveness isn't something you give to people who tried to bury you. Marcus and I are good, stronger than before. He feels guilty about not standing up to my mother sooner, but I remind him that she was good at manipulation. She'd spent decades perfecting it. Some nights, I still think about that moment in the recovery room. The sound of the pen scratching paper, the coldness in my mother's voice, the way she said, "if she doesn't make it." And I think about how close I came to never waking up, how close I came to letting her win. But I did wake up, and I fought back, and I won. Last week, I visited my grandfather's grave. I brought flowers and sat on the grass next to his headstone. "I kept my promise," I said. "I did something good with it." The wind rustled through the trees, warm and gentle. And for a moment, I could almost hear his voice. "That's my girl. You're the steady one." I stood up, brushed the grass off my jeans, and walked back to my car. My mother tried to rewrite my ending while I was unconscious. I woke up, and I rewrote hers. If you've ever had to choose yourself over family to survive, type freedom in the comments. You're not alone.